Welcome to the One Hand at a Time podcast. I'm your host, Chris Welton, and no, this is not a previous recorded intro. It sounds like it might be just because every time I start out these days, it's like, hey, I have someone else I met at a mastermind, and this is exactly what we have here. I have a friend of mine I met at a mastermind. We hit it off right away, had some great conversations leading up to this, and I can't wait for her to share her tactics and strategy to help you mortgage originators and realtors be more aggressive in prospecting through social media spaces. So welcome to the call, my friend Michelle. How are you?
I'm so good, Chris. Thanks so much for having me. This is awesome.
Of course. You know, we talked before the camera started rolling because I really think it's important that we're able to break down exactly what it is you do. But before we get to that, I want to know a little bit about you, right? I think it's important we know if we're going to possibly do business with somebody, who are we doing business with, right? Like today, it seems like on social media, we may not be really doing business with the person who's on that screen or what that looks like or who they represent themselves as, right? So I think it's important to know who you are first, kind of your values with business and in life, and then make sure we have a value match for most of my listeners. And I'm sure we will, or I wouldn't have you on as a guest. So that covers part of that. But so my question is, you were born, and then what happened?
Yeah, great way to start that for sure. But I was born and raised in Southern California, and I don't love to claim that nowadays, but I was born right by Disneyland, grew up there my whole life, actually started competitively swimming at the age of 4. So I was in the water most of my childhood, ended up competing at a very high level, getting recruited to swim for Rutgers. So I ended up moving across the country and swimming for Rutgers all 4 years. It was insanely phenomenal. And honestly, I am so grateful for what that taught me. And I think that that's important to say because the discipline and the type of life that I have lived, I think is very different than your traditional millennial. I was never at parties. I didn't really even understand the concept until I was in college. And then once I figured it out, it really wasn't that fun to me. So I spent most of my time swimming and studying. Ended up graduating with a degree in psychology and journalism with the thought process of if I'm going to write a book about something someday, then I better understand humans and how people operate. So that's where the combination of journalism and psychology came from. And then fast forward to graduating from college, I decided not to go pro as a swimmer. So long story short there wasn't a lot of money in it. And I also wasn't going to make the Olympic team. And I was very aware of that. So I made the decision that most have to make at that point, which is I got to go get a job and start my adult life. So I ended up getting a job at a small public relations firm based out of Philly at the time. So when I graduated from Rutgers, I moved south. It was either New York or Philly, and I chose Philly just for cost of living and a million other reasons. But I ended up working for the PR firm. I was the number one sales rep for the PR firm on the entire Eastern Seaboard. But I was still dirt broke, and it was because there just wasn't a lot of money in it. And so I ended up deciding to get my master's degree. So I pursued that in social media public relations, which in 2012 was unheard of. That was not a thing. Most people were like, what? Like they just had no idea what that really meant. But it was so powerful for me to understand, okay, if we're going to use social media, what does that mean as a business? How do we navigate it from a PR standpoint? Just like, any of these big corporate type companies would, writing press releases and producing content saying, hey, this happened, this incident happened. How do we address this? How do we overcome X, Y, or Z? And so I was able to actually take a full 2 years worth of curriculum as to how that applies to social media. And it was really insane. Honestly, it was very, very overwhelming in the best possible way. I actually didn't technically finish, so I did not do my thesis. I decided to build what is now known as Beyond the Method, which is the course that I have created instead. So instead of paying $40,000 for a thesis or to get a thesis, I actually get paid to do it now, which is cool. But that was in 2012. Fast forward to today. I am a military wife, so my husband is medically retired, was stationed here, based out of Clarksville, Tennessee. We now live here again. He's now contracted by the military. But I am a mom. I have a 3-year-old, almost 3-year-old. He is obsessed with all things cars for all my boy moms out there. and boy dads for that matter. I am a competitive CrossFitter and I run half marathons pretty regularly. So I train a lot. Fitness is very, very important to my husband and I both. He is getting ready to hopefully qualify for Boston in November. So fitness is just a big part of our lives. And it's a big part of, I believe, in my opinion, why I am the business owner that I am today.
I would, I've met you in person, so I know how important fitness is to you. Yeah, she definitely, we shared the misery of the Ben Newman unrequired workout.
Yes.
And I don't know if you've seen that, but we were on the episode this last week of Ben Newman's documentary series on YouTube. Did you see
Yeah,
that,
I did.
Michelle?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So my wife was laughing at me. She's like, your butt's way up in the air doing the planks. You need to get your butt down. But so we were part of that together, which was cool. And I think you become better friends as you go through pain.
Totally.
And we went through it that morning with Ben. You know, first of all, I didn't know you were a SoCal girl because I'm from Huntington Beach originally. So there's we're representing Orange County here on the call today. Again, I don't claim that very often either myself. I'm a Florida guy now. I live in what I believe to be one of the only free states in the union. So let's talk social media prospecting. I mean, look, I own a coaching company. I was in the mortgage industry for a long time. I ran car dealerships for a long time. And one of the challenges I face is the consistency with following up with people through social media and DMs and making sure that I stay in front of it. I've got this card here that, this card, Renee passed these cards out when we were in Phoenix, right? So I've got one on there. I have my POCs today, which are my point of contacts that I've got to do. So let's talk about what your company does to make that easier, to make sure people are held accountable to getting their prospecting and through DMs and social media.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for the way you queued that up too. That was awesome. So I think the fastest, easiest way to explain what it is that I do is I teach people how to actively outbound prospect through the Instagram platform. So Instagram and social media really in general, most people assume that it is a platform they can just post and then they'll wake up the next morning to business. The reality is that that's not the case. And there is more often than not a lack of value and a lack of authenticity that comes through the platform. So if you want to grow your following, if you want to get more likes and more engagement, as far as I'm getting more video views, I'm not your girl, right? Can I teach you how to do that? Yeah, but that doesn't matter. Like that really doesn't matter. Because what ultimately truly does matter is, are you waking up to a multitude of messages every day that are in your inbox of conversations that need to be continued or conversations that have been initiated through a connective point or something that has created connection between me and you, right? So whether that's working out, whether that's cooking, whether that's you have a new son, I have a son, whatever that connection point is, that is what should be the root of all of our relationships and all of our content that then leads to the ultimate end game, which is creating conversion. So what I do specifically is I teach 3 phases, and in the 3 phases, each of them is designed to build upon the previous so that we then get to the place where our platform is a well-oiled machine producing business for us on a regular basis. But I will say, disclaimer, right? At no point am I done prospecting. Every single day I wake up and I prospect through the platform. So quickly, I think it's important to make a note here of social media, right? And Instagram specifically for sake of conversation. Most people, I would err on the side of 95+% of people are using Instagram as a passive platform, meaning they're producing content and they're waiting, right? So they wait for a comment to come in, they wait for a DM to come in, and then they reactively respond to that engagement that they've now received. That is
Are you calling me out right now, Michelle? I feel like you're calling me out. Like you're looking
maybe,
at me
but
across the screen here. We made
say
eye contact.
95%.
I feel like this was right at Chris. Go ahead. Sorry to interrupt, but I felt like really I had to say something there because I felt guilty.
No, that's so good. And I said 95% for a reason, right? Like really, truly 95%. And again, that's a made up number, but at the same time, it's probably not far off of how many people or what percentage of people are using Instagram as a passive platform. Again, meaning we're producing content and we're waiting for someone to message us. We're waiting for someone to comment on something that we've posted, and then we react, right? We then respond. What I teach and how I teach it is really honestly the exact opposite. So content matters, and I'm not going to discount what we're posting, but I am going to tell you that that is not the end all be all to the success of your platform. What is the success of your platform, or what does, in my opinion, contribute the most to the success of your Instagram platform is, are you actively outbound creating new opportunities for yourself? Meaning, I don't know you, Chris, so I found you on Instagram. You're connected to Renee, you're connected to Greg, you're connected to all these other people that I also know. Oh, well, why would I not send you a message to say, hey, Chris, I don't know how we don't know each other, but you're connected to this person, you have a three, or you have a son, I have a son, you were at this, and I was at that. How do we not know each other? Let's jump on a call and get to know each other. That's active prospecting. That's me saying, hey, I'm using my platform as an opportunity to create a relationship with someone that I don't know through my favorite word, which is leverage. And if you use Instagram properly, you're creating leverage every day, right? So to pull myself back, right? My focus is active prospecting. That's what I teach people how to do, but it's built into 3 phases. So in phase 1, we're going to talk about content, right? What are you posting? What does it sound like? And then ultimately, what does it look like? Those are the 3 big parts that go into phase 1, because what you are posting does matter, right? You do have to produce content that is going to attract the right person and your people, right? So if you're producing content thinking, well, I don't want to alienate anybody, or I want to cast as wide of a net as possible, you're doing it wrong. Like, you're just straight up doing it wrong, because I don't care if you don't like that I am running, but that's who I am. Like, I'm a runner, right? So I'm going to produce content and say, well, Chris, maybe you're not a runner, but maybe that, if anything, the fact that I am a runner is attractive to you, where you're like, oh, well, she works really hard. So even though I'm not a runner, I'm sure she could probably help me, right? So that's the one thing that's important to say. It's like, if we say, oh, we specialize in working with veterans, but all we post is veteran content, that doesn't mean that the person who's not a veteran isn't going to reach out to you. It just means, if anything, they might be more likely to want to reach out to you because they realize how specialized you are. So they'll say, oh, well, Chris, I know you specialize in veterans, but I'm not. Is that okay? And of course, a loan officer or anybody is going to be like, well, yeah, absolutely. So if anything, it makes you more attractive to your audience. So that's important. So what we're posting, what does it sound like is also really important, right? So what do we sound like on video? What do our scripts look like? How do we talk on a teleprompter? Does it look like we're talking from a teleprompter? And then ultimately, how do we write copy so that it sounds really approachable and people feel connected to what we're writing? The biggest piece of advice I can give you on caption writing is we need to write like we talk to people. So instead of writing like we would be writing an email, or writing a caption like we would write an email, which is very professional and kind of sometimes overdone, in my opinion, we need to write copy on Instagram and social media as if we're on the phone talking to one another. And that's really important. And then the last piece to phase 1 is obviously what our content looks like. So the branding aspect, which, Chris, obviously you're brilliant at how you have branded yourself. And that's a huge part of phase 1, is making sure that when someone knows who is Chris, they know that your logo is Chris, and they know that Chris is your logo, and those are synonymous. And the biggest thing with that is, when I go and I consume your content, or someone goes and consumes my content, what emotions does it elicit, and how does it make people feel? And that, if I have done good there, then I know that the right person, the person who's ready to work with me, will.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question on the phase 1. I wrote down a note here real quick, because I just came from an event. I won't say what the event is, because but I was at a big event. A lot of people there do the same exact scripts
Every time. Yep.
right? So, like, do you feel that it needs to be different, or like, because I see a lot of people, it's the same canned script, and I know some people are successful with that, but I find that it tends to be more. Of course, I follow a lot of these people, so I'll open up my Instagram and I'll see like 12 of the same exact videos. What's your opinion on that, as far as it being that type of canned script, or should it be more unique, more personality based?
I think you'll agree with me here, but no, absolutely not. Should it be canned scripting? And if you're listening to this and you're paying, a monthly membership for 5 scripts to end up in your inbox, copy paste, everybody can use it. Please stop spending the money. And what I would coach you on, and If you guys are watching Chris and I, it'll be different. But if you're listening to me, just imagine a Venn diagram, and on one side you have passions, on the other side you have expertise and or your pain points. So you have two circles with an intersection between those two things, right? A traditional Venn diagram. Passions on one side, expertise on the other side, and the intersection of those two things is your content. So example, I have a client right now in the mortgage space who is a DIY project guy. So he loves building stuff. He's constantly outside building, planter beds, this or that, like whatever him and his wife come up with, they do DIY everything. And when he came to me about content, I said, okay, awesome. Let's use that in our content when we talk about mortgages. And he was like, what? And I'm like, let me explain. So what we did was we created an analogy between, and we picked one of his most recent DIY projects, which happens to be a retaining wall, a cool one with like the lights in it and like the walkway and the whole thing. So I said, okay, let's create an analogy between building or DIYing a retaining wall and the process of getting someone to understand how their mortgage payment breaks down, right? So if you're paying $5,000 a month for your mortgage, whatever the number is, what is the breakdown of how that gets compiled? So he said that was one of the big pain points for his clients, is they were wondering, like, what are all the factors that go into what that number is? So we literally built an analogy. Thank you, ChatGPT, right? We said, can you build an analogy between the process of DIYing and building a retaining wall from scratch, and how, as a mortgage originator, you would coach someone on understanding what all of the different numbers are that make up a mortgage payment? Hit send, enter in ChatGPT, right? And then it comes back. And typically I'll say I'm making a 5-part series out of this at the end of it before I actually hit enter, just for sake of clarity, for ChatGPT. And what happens is we get this really beautiful response of 5 individual things that ChatGPT has now broken it down to us for, or in. And then we take each one of those 5 things that ChatGPT gave us, and we turn that into our own video for each of those 5, thus creating an entire series. So imagine if you, and Chris, you're on Instagram all the time, just like me, right? And if you think about it, how many mortgage videos do we see, or real estate videos, where it's very mortgage talking head, right? It's someone sitting at their desk, they're talking about some metric, some data point that just came out, this, that, or the other thing. And it's very dry and it's very boring. And most of the time what happens is people are copying and pasting what everybody else is doing. So they're saying, oh, well, John Doe recorded a video about conforming loan limits, or the new VA loan conversation that's recently surfaced. And so, oh, well, so-and-so did it, so that means I need to do it, right? No, it doesn't. So the retaining wall series for this particular client of mine, it's super unique. We're talking about something that is very much a pain point for his ideal clients, but the hooks of all 5 of those videos have nothing to do with mortgage whatsoever, right? And they're designed to get people to actually watch his content. Now, mind you, in addition to that, he's recording all 5 of these videos outside in front of his retaining wall in different sections of it, or one of them holding all of his tools, et cetera, et cetera. And I say all of that to you to say that the average watch time on Instagram, if you look at the data for a video, the average watch time, if you're lucky, is 3 to 6 seconds. That's very much so Instagram wide, the average. Myself included, as well as all of my clients, we average anywhere from 11 to 16 seconds. So you do the math, right? That's a massive difference in watch time. And that's because we're not talking about, or we're not starting videos, I should say, talking about what everybody else is talking about it. We're coming from a place of, 1, super authenticity, like we are showing up as us. And 2, we're talking about it from an angle that is not mortgage centric all the time, right? Yes, we subliminally are talking about mortgages, and we certainly talk about those things, but it's not coming, we're not leading with that, is probably a better way of describing that. And it makes a massive difference.
I had the opportunity Saturday morning to listen to Alex Hermosi for about 45 minutes live, which was like
insane. Yeah.
Awesome, incredible. Like, he was a surprise guest. I had no idea he was going to be there. One of the things that he said to everybody is that your first intro part of your video has to match your thumbnail. It's got to match your thumbnail. He said, too many people do this crazy clickbait thumbnail, and then it gets to it and they're talking about something totally different, and they lose the person. So Is that how you're getting people to watch longer because you're the thumbnail? I mean, it's all synced up and lined up, or what would you say?
It's really, I mean, I think that's more of an aesthetic conversation, which matters for sure. I 1,000% agree with Alex. I have all of his books. The 100 million offer book. I can see it on my bookshelf right here, and I've read it 15 times. But um, how for us, how we focus so much on getting our videos to be watched longer is our hook. So, Chris, you're no stranger to
Mhm.
Opus, right? Our mutual
Yep.
friend Renee and how we met is a huge fan of Opus. And if you're listening to this and you're like, what the hell did Michelle just say? It's called Opus Clip. It's a software that you can upload video content into. After you've recorded it, you can brand your captions to match your color palette. But most importantly, Opus actually allows us to get a grade on our videos. So it's out of 100 score. And then in addition to that, it breaks down the score into 4 categories. So you have your hook category, obviously being the first, engagement, trend, and flow, I believe is the 4th category. But you get these grades in each of these 4 categories. And I've had clients who will get videos that come back and it's like a 99, which is amazing. However, their hook category is like a B or a B minus. So of the 4 categories, everything is so good except for the hook. And I'm like, well, I'm sorry, but you got to redo the video. And I've had some clients that you can see they just like deflate. They're like, no. And I'm like, you want your video to do well, that hook has to be an A. And so we'll go back and we'll look at their scripting and see, I can see what is going on in there. And I can very easily help them tweak how that script sounds so that it's coming from a place of piquing interest to get them through that first 3 to 6 seconds. Because if you open a video and say, hey guys, there's been an update in the conforming loan limits, there is no way in hell anybody's listening to that past that. So all of this, though, like to your question and what phase 1 is, right? All of this ties into how we then proceed into phase 2, which is the main core focus of the conversation that I know you and I wanted to have, which is about prospecting. So if you're in my world, right, we have to tackle phase 1 first. Before we get to phase 2, we are crushing phase 1, making sure that all of that is a well-oiled machine, because phase 2 is prospecting. So now we are discovering who to be talking to. We're building all of that out. We're literally building an entire Excel spreadsheet from start to finish, Monday through Friday, exactly who we're supposed to be talking to on each of the 5 days. So it's very structured on purpose. Main reason for why the structure is developed the way that it is because, I mean, I get it on my phone. I'm sure you do too, where you're like average watch time or screen time. And then it shows you all the different apps that you've spent XYZ amount of screen time on. Instagram is always number 1. And the reality is, what are we doing on Instagram when we're on it, right? How many hours have we aimlessly scrolled without intentional outbound effort that is designed to make us money? So in phase 2, we're talking about who are we talking to? So we're building the spreadsheet out. We're talking about what to say to them. And this is so massive, and it is done so poorly on the platform. I mean, how many of us, both you and I included, Chris, can say, and everybody listening to this can say that we've received a slimy car salesman DM in our inbox, or we've gotten a slimy message on LinkedIn or
I
Facebook
got
or
one in the business
wherever.
suite as we were sitting here in the Meta Business Suite, but yeah. Yeah.
Oh, and you'll get
Yeah.
15 more today for sure. And that's the reality, right? Is we're bombarded by all of these slimy messages from people that are prospecting, quote unquote, on the platform, but they're copy pasting, mass messaging these conversation or these text blocks, right? Long paragraphs to people, and they're expecting it to work. And now, do they get maybe 1 out of 200 people they send it to? Yeah, but that's a pretty shitty at bat percentage, if you ask me. Right. So the way that I teach this is very different, and it's designed to go way back to the foundation of human psychology, which is how can I connect to you, which will then make you feel obligated in not a negative way, but in a good way, psychologically, to respond to me. Right. So the breakdown of our messages and how we send them is really rooted in acknowledgement, subliminal business play, and we always end it in the form of a question. So when I am initially prospecting, I acknowledge first, always, right? Chris, oh my gosh, Leo is so cute. I cannot believe that you have a son. I have a son too! Exclamation point. Then it's a subliminal business play, or the middle of that first comment or message to you, is a subliminal business play. So I may say all of that about Leo, and then I may say, How has it been for you with traveling? Because I know for me, I travel a lot to speak, and it definitely is hard on having a 3-year-old, or on me having a 3-year-old, question mark. And then I ask another question, how old is Leo? Question mark. So it's kind of like a sandwich in a way. Acknowledgement, subliminal business play ended in the form of a question, and that ending question is back to being about you. So now if you got a message like that, Chris, how do you feel? Like, how would you feel?
I mean, a lot better than the guy who just sent me, said, "Don't you feel like you deserve 1 million followers in your Instagram account?" I mean, like a little better than that. Or I can grow your Instagram by 30,000 followers, $600 USD. Okay, well, first of all, I know they're not here, and I know that's not what I want. But yeah, it's more personal, I think. I like what you said earlier about the piece of, if it's the triangle of trust theory, right? Like, I know you, you know this person, we should know each other, kind of deal there. So my question right now is, does your team, like, you teach us to do this, but do you actually have the team that puts in place, that runs the DMs and does that stuff for the LOs, for the originators, and the realtors, or are they in charge of that themselves?
Yeah, so yes and no, and my process is very intentional. So if you are listening to this and you're like, well, can Michelle just do it for me, right? And the answer to that question is, I can certainly coach you through exactly what to do. So I do private coaching constantly. I'm literally on private coaching calls every day, all day, when I'm not on podcasts like this with you. So I coach people through how to set up that tracker, right? So what those 5 days of the week should look like based off of what their goal is with the platform and their goal is within their business, quite frankly. So like if I were building your tracker, Chris, it would look a lot different than somebody that is actively originating day to day. And that would also look a lot different than someone who's actively just recruiting day to day, right? So if you're in the mortgage space and all you're doing is recruiting, your tracker is not going to look the same as John Doe over here that's originating still. So I purposely put those individuals through the coaching aspect of that first. And here's why: because when you decide to turn this over to my company, and my company is now doing it all for you, it's important to understand how it all works before you then just say, go ahead and do it. Right. So back in the day, we used to allow people to come directly into our VIP program. And what we really discovered was that people were not valuing the price point because they didn't understand the why, right? And they certainly didn't understand the amount of time and effort and energy that it goes into to create what it is that we're trying to create. Now we also have a lot of data entry that we'll do with people. So like if we build that tracker out and one of the days of your week is all of the top 100 agents that are in your CRM, well, you got to get us that top 100 list, and then we will go find them all on the platform for you. So we will literally go find their Facebooks, go find their Instagrams, and create that tracker. Create that trackable link in your document, I should say. And then when it comes to us actually doing it all for you on that front, we do and absolutely have done and are continuing to do right now for our VIP clients, the initial comment or the initial message, right? So that very front line of defense where we are commenting on something or we are responding to someone's story on your behalf. Now, here's where this is really important. We cannot and we will not continue the conversations on your behalf if someone replies. So let's say we send 40 messages a day on your behalf, Chris. You wake up that next morning or you check your Instagram later that day and you have 20 responses of the 40. So meaning 20 of the 40 actually replied to that initial message. That's now on you to reply to. And that's really, really important because, and I'll tell you, I've been in business for 10 years and there was a day where we would do all of it for the client from start to finish. The problem is we are not you, right? Nobody is you. Nobody knows how you know somebody, right? So for example, if somebody were to be in my DMs right now and send you a message, Chris, not a single person on this planet knows how I feel about you or how my connection to you will feel. So neural coupling is a big thing that our mutual friend Renee talks about all the time, right? So my brain is going to go into all of these other things that I now know and have experienced with Chris. So nobody else has had that experience. So therefore, nobody could ever talk to you the way that I would talk to you, or to the capacity that I would, because they can't draw upon memory. They can't draw upon experience. Like even I remember after a mastermind, right, where we're in the happy hour next to the charcuterie board thing, and we talked for like 20 minutes right there, right? Not a single person would have ever known that if I was saying or delegating my engagement to them, because they were not there. They were not in that moment. They did not feel what it felt like to stand next to you and have that conversation. So I think that that's really important, is we are your front line, but you have to then continue the conversations so that you have the best opportunity to have the best batting average possible as far as getting those opportunities into conversion. I hope
No,
that
it
makes
does for
sense.
sure. I love that. I've been in DM conversations back and forth with a guy named Dan Martell a few different times, and then I could tell that it wasn't him anymore.
Oh,
It
it's
was
definitely not him, because I
for
have
a little
to.
while. It was. I was with talk to Dan, and then I could tell when it transitioned to his VAs. And I know that because I had a phone conversation with him. I actually wrote a chapter in my book about Dan, and the conversation we had. But um, I I think the biggest struggle is the activity of actually doing the work in this space. I think that what you're telling me is all great, and I know that based off of the people that I know that are using it, there's a big success rate there. But it's just getting the guys to do the work, man. Like that's the struggle, and I think you'll hear that from any leader in any mortgage or real estate company, is getting the people to actually do the work, right? This is going to make it easier for them. I could see how it could benefit me too on the coaching space, on my prospecting and recruiting stuff
Absolutely.
there to get more people into my group program and some other things as well. So we should probably talk about that off the air at some point. But I think that my biggest struggle too, I'm a human, is doing the work. Is doing the work. So
Yeah, and if I can
yeah,
speak into that, I literally just had this conversation with someone yesterday who inquired. He heard me speak on stage at the 1,000 Watt conference a few weeks ago, and was super intrigued and just like, wow, I had no idea this was even a thing. And I talked to him yesterday. He's 100% in. He's like all in, ready to go. But he made the comment to me. He said, Michelle, if I'm honest with you, I do 60 transactions a year by myself. Like, I have a TC and I have a buyer's agent, and that's it. But I do 60 transactions. My average price point is about 700,000. And I'm like, okay. And what's your point? Right. And he was, I didn't say it like that, obviously, but I was talking to him in the sense of, I hear you and I understand where you're coming from. I run a 7-figure company, have 6 full-time employees, and I have 45 active coaching clients that I coach every single week. Like, you guys do the math. That is a shit ton of coaching, but I love it. But do I have time to read? Technically, no. But do I make time to read? Yeah. Right. Why? Because it's something that's so important to how I can operate as a high performer. So what I tell people when they have this conversation, or when I have this conversation with them, is the journey of what I'm teaching and what I'm coaching people to do is really the beautiful piece, right? If you think about Z first, like the letter Z in the alphabet, you're like, oh my gosh, well, I got to get through A, B, C, D, all of the other letters before I get to Z. Like, that's really overwhelming. Now I'm in this paralysis by analysis. I'm never going to make it there. But if all you think about is A today, we're not thinking about B yet. We're not thinking about C. We're just thinking about A. And what does A look like? And I love the little cards that we got at Mastermind from Renee, like the little tracking cards. I forget the name of it. Analog. That's
yeah,
what it is.
that's this right
Um,
here. Yeah.
Mine is, yes, I have a whole deck of them. I'm already in my second box. Like, I'm obsessed with it. But I use analog every single day, and I put the most important thing that needs to get done that day. That is the needle mover, right? So for me, the needle mover is typically a leverage relationship, right? So, like, having a conversation with someone that can create opportunity for me in my company, whether that's teaching or speaking, doing a webinar, whatever, right? And then I move into the list after that. So if for a coaching client, it's okay, we're looking at A right now. So what is the very first thing that we have to do right now today that will make an impact in what we do tomorrow? We're not worried about 2 weeks from today. We're worried about today, right? And I think that's the biggest thing, is the accountability aspect of having a coach that you actually have to get on call with one-to-one is also huge there. So I think gone are the days of I love group coaching for so many reasons, but I think gone are the days of group coaching for tactical things specifically like this, because you really, really need, and in my opinion, you really need a coach that is going to say, hey, Chris, you're paying for this, and you just showed up to a coaching call without having done your homework. Why?
Yeah.
Right? And hey, we're going to take this hour of designated time that I've blocked off on my calendar, that you blocked off on your calendar, and we're going to make an impact right here, right now, today, in this hour. And then all of a sudden the client is a little bit more like fired up, right? And I get emails every single day from people that are just like, oh my gosh, I just did this and this is so cool, right? And they're just like watching themselves move through that tension point of like, oh, this is hard. Oh my gosh, I don't know if I can do this, right? They are literally watching themselves evolve and move through that process. But I think people get really overwhelmed by looking at social media or looking at Instagram as a whole and this process as a whole. And they're like, oh, Chris, that's just so much. I can't do it. Like, what can't you do? There's nothing you can't do. You're choosing not to because you're looking at it as this big, overwhelming Mount Everest instead of, I just got to go worry about this little sand dune I got to get over first.
Yeah, it was funny. Gary Vee spoke too at the event I was at, and he talked a lot about AI, social media, first of all, but he said that's the battle against AI is your personal brand. AI will never be your personal brand,
Absolutely.
but I utilize AI every day. I was just on ChatGPT before we got on here working on some things and just restructuring some stuff. With some content creation that I have. I've got a team out of Argentina that does a lot of stuff for me. And then I have a videographer local as well who travels with me everywhere I go. And, but you're right. It's making the time to do it. I've got to do a lot of content this week. I still owe Ben Newman a 15-minute video on mental toughness for his forum that was due a week ago. So I've got to get that done this week as well. And it comes down to the consistency of wanting to get it done. My next question for you though is seemed to be the everybody that was on stage talked about this last weekend. It was proof. What proof do we have that it's successful, that it works? And you know, I mean, obviously it does because I know the people you're on calls with, and one of my best friends, you were just on his podcast and did a webinar. Brian Covey is one of my best friends. And I was fortunate enough to spend the last 4 days with him in Las Vegas. So, but what can you give me some stats off the top of your head or some proof of like, hey, this is what we've done with other companies and this is why it's been successful and this is why it hasn't with some people?
Yeah. I mean, I don't love data like in that sense. Do I have it? Yeah. And Renee has actually been really instrumental in us having that data, quote unquote, written down. And it's a struggle point for me because I don't think that there's a lot. Maybe I'm saying that wrong. I don't like leading with that, right? Because I believe that when it comes to what I do and how we do it, the unlock is really about the presence itself as a whole. It's an unlock of an understanding of how to create leverage. And it's an unlock of things that they had no concept of doing or why to do or how to do that they can now do. Right. So when you think about going to a therapist, right, I've been in therapy for years. I'm a huge proponent of being in therapy for both mental and physical, all of the things. Right. But when you think about therapy, I don't think about it in a tangible ROI sense. Right. Because it's not about that. Right. And some of it for me, when it comes to like my therapist, we talk about this laughingly all the time. It's like, you know, I've been in therapy with you for 6 months and I feel like every time I get on my session, I get off and I'm like, did I accomplish anything today? Like, am I better today? But then 6 months later, you're like, holy shit, I'm a totally different person. Right. And that's where the beauty lies in what I do, in my opinion, is in the day to day, you're sort of trudging through it and you're kind of like, am I getting better? Am I getting making progress? And then the way I describe it and the way I'll tell it to you is 365 days from now, you'll wake up and be like, whoa. Right? Like my business is wildly different and how I approach this is wildly different. Now, does that mean I don't have metrics? No, I absolutely do. Just yesterday, I was on a coaching call with one of my loan officer clients in Arizona. We went through phase 1. It took us about 3 coaching sessions to get through phase 1, which was great. He was really good at doing his homework. So that's also part of it, right? How good are you at doing your homework? How active are you at doing the things that I need you to do so that I can continue to push your needle? But about 3 calls to get through phase 1. Then we were able to start prospecting. So over the course of about 30 days of prospecting, it was just under 30 days because we don't count the weekends. So quote unquote, like 26 days. He went from 500 or 435 followers, to 532, which was awesome. Just about 100 in a month, which I'm stoked by that because every single one of those were individuals in his hyper local area, realtors specifically in certain parts of the Phoenix metro that he wants to work with. Now, obviously, you got some spam here and there. That's reality. But in totality, about 100 followers for the month, which is phenomenal. And then, most importantly, he actually tracked, and I make you track, all of your outbound messages. So we totaled about 220 DMs that he sent out that over the course of those 26 days, quote unquote, not counting the weekends, right? Out of the 220, he had 5 people say yes to actually sending him business. And since that, 2 of them have already done so. So he ended up with about 11, if I remember yesterday, it was 11 appointments. So 200 outbound messages, 11 appointments. Of the 11 appointments, 5 people said yes to working with him. Yes, they wanted to add him as one of their loan officers. And then 2 since then have also now already sent him a deal, right? So to me, that's an incredible metric because I asked him point blank, his name is DJ. I said, DJ, how long did it take you to send those messages? If you totaled up the 200 that you sent over the course of the 26 days, how long did that take you? He's like, oh gosh, maybe 2 hours total, like over the course of the entire month, right? So how much different would your business look if you spent 2 hours a month on Instagram intentionally sending outbound messages over the course of the month, right? As opposed to making 200 phone calls every week or 100 calls every 2 days, right? Whatever your normal metric is that you have to pound pavement on in order to get to your result. So we're shrinking our time and we're dramatically scaling the output of that, meaning what we're able to accomplish and the actual ROI of what we're able to accomplish. Now, all of that goes to say how you send messages is important. So he could have sent 200 messages and gotten 0 replies if he did it wrong, which some people do. So I hope that's answering your question, both on the tangible side, but also more importantly, in my opinion, on the subliminal side.
Yeah, it definitely does. I mean, it's just like anything. There's no like shortcuts to success. You have to do the work, but here's a roadmap, right? Like here's a GPS on how to make it work. The assistance and help building some of those things out is great, but you still have to do the work, right? Like you still have to put the work in and make sure that happens. And I think that's where the biggest gap is right now with your top performers and the guys that aren't getting anything done is the work. The top guys continue to work regardless of the market and the other ones don't.
Well, I mean, people ask me, Michelle, what's the number one thing that you think contributes to your success, quote unquote? And I don't love that question, if I'm honest, but I think I personally, because I think it's loaded, it's a very in-depth conversation that is needed in order to accomplish that answer, or the true totality of like how you're so successful. But I think for me, the reason I'm really successful is I just don't have a back door at all, period, in my brain, in how I operate. As you know, who I've shared with some personal things that have happened for me recently with you. There were plenty of opportunities for me to fold and say, you know what, this is hard and I'm tired and I don't want to do it anymore because I'm tired. And in my brain, I let that happen for about an hour. And then I was like, fuck that. Like I'm really good at what I do. I love what I do. I love the people I get to work with every single day. And so for me, it's not having a backdoor to business or in life. Right. So when I say having a backdoor, I mean like, oh, well, if this doesn't work out, I'll just go do this. Right. Or if this doesn't happen to turn out the way I want it to, it's okay. I'll just go do this. Like, no, that doesn't even enter my brain at all. Because if I fail at something, I love that. I'm like, cool, I just failed. Now it's a challenge. Let's go figure out why I failed and do it better. And it's a testament to, 5 years ago when I launched Beyond the Method in early 2019, it didn't work. I did not convert the way that I, in my brain, had intended it to. So I went back to the drawing board. I hired a coach and I figured out why it didn't work. I relaunched later that year and we've now done close to 5 million in course sales alone since then. Like it's wild, right? Like where I'm sitting right now today, I'm like, okay, well, I launched and it failed. So in that moment, I could have been like, well, I guess it just didn't work out. Um, and instead, I got really honest with myself and was like, if this is what I want to do, and if this is the life that I want to have, where I can be home full time, I can raise my son full time and run a really successful company, how do I fix this? How do I figure it out? And I think that's the tenacity of someone like us,
Yep.
you included, obviously, or I don't think we'd be in the positions that we're in. But you have to be tenacious as hell, and you have to, more importantly, be in rooms and be with people that really like frustrate you in a good way. Because I remember even being in the mastermind, and when you and I were there, Chris, and I'm just like, man, these people are so smart. Why am I here? And in my brain, I'm like, I am less than. I am not good enough to be sitting in this room. But the reality is that's not true. Like, Renee wanted me in that room, and there was a reason why Renee wanted me in that room. And I think you just have to own your space, but you have to know that when you feel that way. So if you're listening to Chris and I and you're like, Michelle, great idea, cool concept, but like, I don't have time for that. Like, you have to own the fact that you're not good at something, and what I'm describing to you or Chris is describing to you is something that you're not doing. Then say, I'm not good at that, and that's okay, and that's an okay feeling. I'm good with the fact that I don't know how to do that. So now how do I overcome that? And I think that's where we own our space and we say, no, yes, I do deserve to understand how to figure this out, and I do deserve to be in this room with these people. And that's where growth happens. And I think most people are scared of that. Most people are scared of that feeling of inferiority, of like, I'm less than, or I don't know how to do something, so I'm just not going to do it. Because it's not a cool feeling. It's not an enjoyable feeling when it's happening. But it's my
Yeah,
favorite feeling, frankly.
I'm a weirdo, sicko, whatever you want to call it. I love that feeling. I've never been afraid of that part. Um, my battle I have with myself every day is I really just want to do nothing and watch TV for a living. I'm just being honest. Like, that's the thing that really holds me back. So, um, but it's true. If you really want if you want what you say you want, then your actions have to back it up, right? Let's look at your calendar. Let's look at what we're doing every day. Are we making it happen? And this is a tool I believe that a lot of people could benefit from. That's why I wanted to have the call with you, and spread the word for people out there. And it's like, look, it's simple. What does it say? It's easy, but it's not simple, or it's simple, but it's not easy. Like, it's a philosophy that, or strategy we know that's going to work, but you got to put the work in, right? It just has to be done to make that happen. And I think a lot of people are afraid. What if it does work? Then I got to keep doing the work. Oh, yeah. Well, let's be honest. I'm okay with that because that's my competition in my space that I deal with. You know what I mean? So I don't consider them competition when it comes to things like that.
Most people want the
Yeah.
easy way out, right? Most people want here, just send me 5 scripts and I'll just go record these 5 videos so I don't have to use my brain and I don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
And is that going to work? Maybe temporarily, maybe short term. You'll see an influx of new because you're doing something that you've never done before. But is that going to, this is just one example, right? But like, is that going to create a long-standing business that is going to really create a ton of opportunity for you over the long term?
I've seen
Nope.
so many people with that strategy grow their social media really fast and get a lot of followers, and then they're all exactly where they were a year ago. Like they haven't grown in a year. Like, I mean, they haven't seen anything in a year. So I think there's a lot to be said with the social media side of things that they talked about at the event I was at, and Alex Hermosi was a lot about, look, it's not really about the number of people that are watching your video. It's the number of quality people that are watching your video, and understanding that the algorithm is getting smarter and smarter and smarter, and it's only going to send that video to people that can benefit from it. So I love that aspect of it as well. So Michelle, what's the best way for people to learn more about what you offer and to connect with you?
Yeah, the best way is Instagram for sure. I answer all my own messages, so you can certainly message me and know that it's me responding. But Berman Media Social, I'm sure that'll
Yep.
be in the show notes for everybody. But you can shoot me a DM. There's really 3 big ways to work with me. Number 1 would be to work with me for private coaching. So I love my private coaching clients. It's absolutely my favorite thing to do. And then secondarily to that would be our VIP program, where my team actually does everything for you. 97% of people have to go through coaching first to some extent, or at least a little, before they're allowed in that program, for obvious reasons. And we can certainly talk more about that. And then the third big opportunity as far as working with me is speaking in webinars. I do a ton of webinars every week, or every month, I should say. This week I have 3, but usually I don't have quite so many in a single week, but I average about 5 to 7 a month. So it's a pretty consistent thing that I do. Whether you're a real estate company, mortgage company, it really doesn't matter. I love doing webinars, and then speaking in real life is certainly something that I really, really love to do. There's just nothing better than rubbing shoulder to shoulder with people that are trying to get better. So really all of that, you can get me through Instagram if any of those things make sense for you. Definitely the best place to start.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule. Have you done your workout of the day yet? Have you gotten it in? Okay.
I have not. I have an upper body workout later this morning that I have to do in my 95-degree garage. But yes.
Well, thanks again, Michelle. I look forward to seeing you again soon at some point. And thanks for sharing so much knowledge with our listeners today. Thank you for tuning into the One Hand at a Time podcast. Please make sure you like and share the episode. And we'll see you next time here at the One Hand at a Time podcast. Make it a great day.